Okay, for today, first up, I want to just review a little bit of graphing because the graphing test is coming, but it isn't coming until Friday, which means the lab is due on Monday. All right, thought you'd like that. So your graphing test will have things like this. Everybody just start with sine. If I just asked you to graph y equals sine of theta. Now there's a whole bunch of labels that are going to be super important. You can't just know what the wave looks like. You have to know how to label it properly. All right, did you know it looked kind of like that? And did you know the labels? I'd start with, I used to start with 2 pi at the end. I actually kind of like this better. 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, and 4 pi over 2. It just has a nice flow to it. And I know that 4 pi over 2 is 2 pi, and I think you do too. So the benefit is if I have to move this thing to the right, it'll be much easier to label the next spot. Would you please label one more spot out? You'll never be marked wrong for labeling too much. But if you forgot when we shift this thing to the right, if you forgot to label this as, well, again, I think I could get seriously a 5-year-old to guess what the next thing is. 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, 5 pi over 2. They may not even know what it means, but they could know it's got to be 5 pi over 2. You got one at home?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. All right. So I've got it all ready for us to shift it to the right. What would cause that to happen? If I had in here a minus pi over 2. Now, don't even do it, please, because that would be a little too easy. But I just want to talk about it. Which way would it go? Right. Right pi over 2. Now, that's called a phase shift, and they are directional. So a common, they lose 5% is because they say, what's the phase shift? And the kid goes, pi over 2. It's got to be directional. You got to say which way pi over 2. So in this case, right pi over 2. All right, next. Let's say I put a 8 here. It has to be the easiest change to make of all. Put a mark here and a mark here. That used to be 1 and -1, and now they're 8 and -8. See how easy that was? Okay, and again, this whole thing would have to move to the right. And now it's the blue one. Fairly easy, I hope. Okay, what if they're more complicated like this? Y equals 6 cosine of 5 pi minus 10, all in parentheses. Try that one. This is cosine, note. In a moment, I'd like you to compare it with the kid next to you, so try to do quality writing so that they can read it. It takes you twice as long, but that probably only adds 30 seconds to make it look readable. Okay, here's what you should have done. Cosine is, I like to think of it as a valley shape. And that one's off just a little too much. I'm going to say that's good enough. And then 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, and 4 pi over 2. Then I'm going to put this at 6 and -6 because of the amplitude. Next, I'm going to factor out that inside and make it 5 parentheses. Pi minus 10 over 5. What is 10 divided by 5? It's 2. Now that's going to be a pain to move to the right 2. The main thing I'd be interested in is, did you realize that's not 2 pi? That's just 2. Okay, so let's talk about it. First off, this 5, you do your renumbering first. Before you make a move of 2, you're going to renumber everything. So you go through and you multiply everything by 5 on the bottom. I really shouldn't be saying multiply by 5 because that's what it looks like you're doing. So you don't multiply by 5 because it's on the inside. You don't trust it. You multiply by 1/5, which causes the denominators to all be 10. So I'm going to say we would not give you one like this on a test because it's just too difficult to know exactly how far to move it. But if I have to move it 2, I'm looking for one of these that's the closest to 2. Would you agree that pi is about 3? 3-ish. Do you get then that 3 over 10 is not even close to 2? And this is 2 pi over 10. That's not even close to 2. This is 3 pi over 10, and that's about 9. That's almost 10 over 10. That's almost 1. So 3 marks is almost 1. Do you get that that means it's about 6 marks? If you knew that you should move it over 6 marks, then you were on track. Okay, that would be pretty good. And I totally get on a test, we'd probably have to have a pi here to keep tons of kids from getting it wrong. So if I did have a pi there, if there had been a pi in the problem, you'd move it over to the right 2 pi? But after relabeling, that's much more complicated to find. Okay, so you'd have to keep moving over until you found where 2 pi was, which would be way 5 times further to the right than it used to be. So this one's a little tricky, but at least at a minimum, did you have your X and Y axes labeled correctly? And did you know you're supposed to move it to the right? Something. All right. We'll practice a more actually one that's like something we could test you on. We'll practice that tomorrow. Go ahead.
What if when you just had the 2,
Yep.
you were adding it to the bottom ones, what if you changed it to be 20 over 10 so that it had matching numbers?
I hear what you're saying. I like that. So you're saying instead of thinking of it as a 2, thinking of it as a 20 over 10 is still equal to 2. And then each mark is pi over 10. So it would move over 20. Oh, wait, this is messing with my head. Yup. I'm just making sure this is right. So this would be, this was a 10 here though. So it would be 10 over 5, which is 2, which is the same as 20 over 10. I can't argue with any of this, it's right. But that would imply I should move it to the right. A lot more marks than I thought it was. Okay. Well, again, you won't have anything that hard. I officially stumped myself on that one. So let's stop talking about our graphing problems. Let's go to this kind of a question. If I give you a high spot and a low spot, are you going to be able to tell me the equation that goes through it? Let's say this is at 2, 10, and this is at 5, 4. I've given you a high. I've given you a low. You should be able to write the equation that goes through that. Y equals cosine. Well, something cosine. And I'll just say A cosine of B times X minus C plus D. And you figure out A, B, C, and D. I'll pause for a second. Let me try that one.
Wait, this y equals, well, you have it written up there. Then personally, I started with the shift to the right.
Okay. What is the shift to the right?
It is a shift to the right.
You are correct. That 2 goes right there. All right. And I like to always find the midline. Did you find that as well? What did you get for the midline?
7.
All right. Exactly between 10 and 4 is 7. So then the 7's right here. And then from 7 to 10 is 3, and that's the amplitude. And last but not least, the b. I've gotten used to these as just 2 pi over the period. What was the period? Oh yeah, from 2 to 5? No, from 2 to 5 is 3. 3 is not the period. 6 is the period. So there you go, 3 for the amplitude, 2 pi over 6. This was a 2 because it was the x value of the first peak, and that's a 7. How many of you got that one totally right? Sweet. If you didn't, I hope you learned something from that. So now we're just doing a little bit of review of top 20, and here's one that a ton of people don't know the fast way. They might be able to find a way to get it to work, but they don't know the fast way. Could you please solve this in 3 steps? It should be easy if you know the right way. If you don't, I'll show you. Are you multiplying by 2 and 7? You can do it at the same time. It makes tons of sense to do that. Because then this 2 will cancel this 2. This 7 will cancel this 7. And you get 7n minus 2 is equal to 56. And from there, it's just 2 more little steps, adding 2 and dividing by 7. How many of you knew that you could multiply by 2 and 7? All right, good. If you didn't know that you could do it at the same time, learn that. It goes a lot faster. Saves you a whole step. Okay, next one that a lot of people do wrong is they go, well, if I just asked a random kid, I guarantee you, there's like a 50-50 chance they would say, well, I multiply it all the way out, and then hopefully they'd remember to set it equal to 0, and then they'd try to factor it, and it wouldn't factor, and then they do the quadratic formula, and that's the super long way. What's the fast way?
Guess.
False. You're never going to guess, like, 8 plus and minus the square root of 7. It's not likely. Anyways, yes? Yep. Square root them. And you get absolute value of x minus 8. Would you please take it from there and solve? Don't forget the absolute value thing, though, because that's what gives you your plus and your minus. Chase, what's the next step? Don't remember absolute values? I'll help. X minus 8 is equal to the square root of 7. X minus 8 is equal to negative square root of 7. The 2 separate equations where this becomes itself and its opposite. You can do it on the left side, but it's more complicated because you'd have to make this all the opposite of what it is if you wanted to do the left side opposite of what it is. Okay. So I add 8 to both sides, and oh my gosh, it's what I said before. 8 plus and minus square root of 7. How'd I get that? Well, here's my 8. They're both 8. And one time you have plus the square root of 7, and one time you have minus. See how quick that is? Okay. Are there any other top 20s? Like some people would like a quick reminder of the distance formula or the midpoint formula or distance?
Yeah.
It's the Fight Club. So you tell me, what's in the fight?
X plus 1.
That is not a fight. That's 2 happily joining together.
X minus 1.
X minus
X
x.
minus x squared and y minus y squared.
Correct. And what's in between them? Because as you walk between the fights, you stub your toe on a
Rock.
Plus sign.
plus sign. Unless you think there's a rock in the formula, in which case, yeah.
That.
The only formula with rock in it. Okay, so that's the distance formula. And
The new variable r.
rock. So if this was a 2 and a 10, do you get it doesn't matter if I do 2 minus 10 or 10 minus 2? It's the only time it doesn't matter because it should be 8 or negative 8. But when you square it, it doesn't matter. So you don't have to worry about which one's which. All right, I think that's enough review. Top 20 coming your way. Clear off your desk, get something to write with. That's all I got for the video for today. If you missed this lesson, you'll be taking the top 20 on a Schoology quiz.